He is the Director of Data Analytics with MGM Resorts. The first question is, how did you first realize you wanted to pursue a career that involved mathematics?
I wanted to do things better. I wanted to do my job better. So that's why I chose data analytics.
Next question. Could you describe one of your typical work days?
My typical work day is intertwining or talking to staff, figuring out how and what data they need to analyze, and painting pictures of data for them.
Okay. What mathematical skills are required in your position on a day-to-day basis?
Ooh, there's a lot. First, there's coding, but all your basic math, multiplication, division, addition, but you have to put it into a spreadsheet and make the numbers work and do all these funny calculations and stuff.
Okay, next question. What educational background do you have?
I have a bachelor's of science and accounting at UNLV.
Okay. What parts of your job do you find most challenging?
I would say dealing with people and coding out data.
Next question. What do you find most enjoyable?
Actually, both. Dealing with people and actually delivering the final product to my clients.
Are there any negatives to your job?
Let me think about just dealing with silly people, dealing with challenging people.
How many hours do you work in a typical week?
45 or 50.
What seasons of the year are toughest in your job?
Actually, all of them.
Is this field going enough so that there's room for someone like me?
Absolutely. This is a hot industry right now, and we need more people. In fact, we just added to staff a person, so it is a growing industry.
What STEM developments on the horizon could affect your occupation?
Data security, cybersecurity, hackers.
Thank you for letting me interview you, and people who love math should do this job if they like to work with numbers.
Hi, my name is Finn Gagnon. I am a 5th grader at Sherrod Elementary, and this is Chris Poplum, a lead oceanographer at the Tsunami Warning Center in Palmer, Alaska. Hey, Chris, these are the questions I will be asking you. How did you first realize you wanted to pursue a career that involved mathematics?
Well, I knew pretty early on that a scientific path was something I was interested in. So the question is, how early did I know?
Well, how did you first realize?
How did I first really realize? Well, I think I realized when I first realized when I saw the opportunities that a scientific and mathematical career presented me in terms of what I could do in undergrad and graduate schools. The opportunities, it looked like a good time, so that's what I did.
Okay. Well, here's the next question. Could you describe one of your typical work days?
Well, you're seeing it. We're just, as we discussed, it's usually pretty calm. Seismic data is flowing by, and you'll get an earthquake here and there, but and every now and then you get a big quake, and the excitement level ramps up, and we're responsible for putting out tsunami warnings and advisories for most of North America, Alaska, both sides of Canada, West Coast, East Coast, and the Gulf of Mexico. So
you go international, like not just inside.
We do, in the sense that we cover Canada. Our sister center, PTWC, they have more of an international role, but yeah, they're issuing statements for Mexico, all of Central America, basically all of the Pacific that's not the U.S. and Canada.
Well, what mathematical skills are required in your position on a day-to-day basis?
Well, I came up. There's math in everything here. Depending, you can get as complicated as you want. I came up with some sort of maybe more fifth grade, maybe fifth grade level math. One thing that we're responsible for doing is that's fine. One thing that we're responsible for doing is telling emergency managers up and down the coast when a tsunami will hit them, and so that becomes a math problem of figuring out how fast a tsunami wave travels, and then how far you have to their coastline. So the
velocity and distance.
To compute travel time, you've got velocity versus distance. But then to figure out the actual speed of the wave, it's the square root of gravity times the depth of the water. So
that sounds really complicated.
It's it's actually it's only two components. So I'm confident that you would be able to figure out. You're simply taking the square root of gravity, 9.8 meters per second squared, times the depth of the water. And basically what that tells you is that the speed of a tsunami is entirely based on, since gravity's constant, the speed of a tsunami is entirely based on the depth of the water.
So, are you opening for hiring?
We always are. Yeah, you have to be 16 years old before you can have a job. We are, actually, as a matter of fact, we are.
What educational background do you have? Like, what's your degree?
Yep. So I got my undergraduate degree in geology from Oregon State University. And then after that, I switched gears to marine geology and oceanography, which I got at the University of Rhode Island.
Cool. Well, I have some relatives who went to college around Oregon, so
oh, really?
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. Oregon State.
Beavers. Or I guess I'm a platypus. Yeah. What parts of your job do you find most challenging?
Well, I think by far the most challenging part of this job is the fact that you can't predict when earthquakes happen. So we need to be here 24 hours a day. So there's always two people here, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year.
Wow.
So what that does is that means that occasionally we'll work night shifts, and like this evening I'm working the evening shift. So really the most challenging part of this job is the schedule, is having to keep this place manned 24 hours a day.
Okay. Well, next up, I guess, is what do you find most enjoyable?
It's interesting. It's interesting work. Locating and sizing up earthquakes all over the world. It's fascinating. It's fascinating stuff. And then when we do get an event, helping spreading the word and saving people's lives. It's sort of a public service aspect of the job that I really like.
Cool. Well, I guess you already answered this next question, but are there any negatives to your job?
Yep. Working night shifts is it's quiet, which is nice, but it does mess with your sleep. So yeah, that's a challenge for sure.
How many hours do you work in a typical week? I guess that might be hard to answer, but
Well, we go in 2 week chunks where we work 80 hours. So it's which is just you average it out and it's 40 hours a week, which is what what the average person works.
like around 6 hours a day.
Well, in a 2 week stretch we'll work 9 9-hour shifts. Actually, 8 9-hour shifts and 1 8-hour shift to make 80 hours. So it works out to be the same hours as a normal job. We just do it in different chunks.
Yeah.
Sometimes we get longer weekends. Sometimes we're working nights. But we work the same amount of hours as a normal job.
Well, which seasons of the year are toughest in your job?
Winter. I mean, the job never changes. Like, earthquakes don't change based on season. But I mean, as we're all aware, life in general gets more difficult in the winter, right?
It's dark out, and you're just like,
Mhm.
I don't want to go to sleep.
Yep, you're more excited about everything, right, in the winter.
All right. Is this field growing enough so there's room for someone like me?
The field is not really growing. That's one thing. There's some turnover. Not everybody can handle the schedule. So there's always job openings, job availability. But the field in the entire U.S. there's only 2 centers. And each center has about 15 people. So it's we're always fighting for funding, and we're fighting to kind of maintain the status quo. They're always trying to cut us back. So I wouldn't say we're expanding, but that's not to say there's not opportunities.
Well, so last question. What STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, developments on the horizon could affect your occupation?
I was thinking about this, and I'm not sure if computer science fits with the STEM model.
I guess technology, science, and mathematics.
There's always advances in the science where, believe it or not, the tsunami warning science is fairly young. And so there's always developments in that area. And maybe what I would use in addition to computer science, there's always development. Like, we've written all this software was written in-house. But one of the exciting ways that we're going now is to try to extract the magnitude of an earthquake from GPS sensors.
Oh.
So right now, we've got seismometers all over the place, and they detect shaking, and you figure out the size of the earthquake from the shaking itself. But what that does is it takes a while to
realize how the effects.
It takes a while to figure out exactly how large the quake is. And the thing with GPS is you can figure out, you have a GPS sensor or a GPS antenna. An earthquake, when an earthquake happens, like pieces of the earth slide relative to each other. So with a GPS unit or a GPS antenna, you know exactly how far that antenna moved instantly, and from that we're trying to establish the magnitude of an event. So in terms of science and STEM, in terms of STEM,
Sort of. All right.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. All right. I guess this kind of concludes the interview. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome, Finn.
Yes. One more thing you need to do is we need to conclude why this occupation should be pursued by a person who loves math.
Yep. There's plenty of math. There's as much math as you could ever want in this job. So yeah, it's absolutely a component.
And plus, the kind of crime fighting of earthquakes is really cool.
Yeah. There's just the fact that we're locating these quakes for the entire planet.
Yeah.
It's an interesting pursuit.
All right.
Good morning. This is Mr. Ross, the principal of Teeland Middle School.
Good morning, Matthew.
Good morning, Mr. Ross. I'm going to ask you some questions today.
Awesome.
How did you first realize you wanted to pursue a career involved with mathematics?
My grandfather and uncle were both teachers, so I knew I wanted to be a teacher, and I love math, so that was my natural route to teaching.
Could you describe one of your typical work days?
Yeah, I arrive in the morning about 6:30 and usually work till around 4 or 5, and my day involves looking at budgets, looking at staffing, trying to get into classrooms as much as possible to see kids learning and teachers teaching, visiting with kids at lunches, lots of interaction with staff and kids.
What mathematical skills are required on your day-to-day basis?
Because I'm responsible for the budget for the school, obviously I deal with a lot of dollars and cents. Scheduling for a school of almost 800 students involves a lot of work with time and shuffling numbers with responsibilities around. So lots of different ways, looking at grades. Yeah.
What educational background do you have?
I have a degree in elementary education as well as a master's degree in elementary education. I have received a minor in mathematics, and I have a degree in administration.
What parts of your job do you find most challenging and negative?
I wouldn't say that there are parts of my job that are negative, but there are certainly challenges every day. When students make poor choices, helping them learn about their choices can be challenging. Figuring out how to keep class sizes low is a challenge that we're going through right now. So they're good challenges, but they are challenges.
What do you find most enjoyable?
I love when I get to see a student have that sense of accomplishment on their face, whether they're learning in the classroom, succeeding in an extracurricular activity, or making a new friendship. When kids are finding success, schools are doing their job.
How many hours do you work in a typical week?
I would say between 55 and 60 hours. There's a lot of work to be done at the building during the day, and then that work sometimes carries into the night with preparation for the next day or events coming up.
What seasons of your job are the toughest?
The opening day of school is always a huge day of excitement, but it is challenging because there are lots of kids that don't know where they're going in a building this large and aren't used to moving classes as frequently as they do. And then the preparation at the end of the year to wrap up the school year with promotion and field days and all those just involve lots of scheduling of events.
Is this field growing enough so that there's room for someone like me?
There's always room for qualified teachers, and certainly a need for qualified teachers.
What STEM develops on the horizon could affect your occupation?
Technology is becoming increasingly important and involved in education, so the work that's done in STEM classes, in engineering and mathematics related to technology and problem solving is excellent for helping create good, well-rounded citizens able to solve problems with their hands moving forward.
Thank you, Mr. Ross. That was very inspirational.
Good job, Matthew.
Hi, my name is Noah, and I am interviewing Kristen Holzman. She is a respiratory therapist. So the first question, how did you first realize you wanted to pursue a career that involved mathematics?
I did. It was unintentional. God just kind of opened the door for me.
Could you describe one of your typical work days?
A typical workday starts with going and doing patient rounds, and then changing ventilator settings, and then doing rounds with doctors and nurses to collaborate and see how we're best going to help that patient.
What mathematical skills are required in your position on a day-to-day basis?
I have to know how to do basic equations for algebra and physics. The ventilators that we use has to do with all of that.
What educational background do you have?
I have an associate's degree in respiratory therapy.
parts of your job do you find most challenging?
The patients, because no two patients are the same.
What do you find most enjoyable?
The patients, because no two patients are the same. So you can have a patient who is doing really bad, and you can see them turn around to do really good.
Are there any negatives to your job?
Yeah, I deal with a lot of death.
How many hours do you work in a typical week?
I work 36 hours in a week.
Which season of the year is the toughest for your job?
The toughest season would be winter.
Is this field growing enough so that if there's room for someone like me?
Absolutely. The bigger the population gets, the more medical needs are needed. So they need personnel to staff it.
What science, technology, engineering, and mathematics develop on the horizon can affect your occupation?
Anything with technology, because I work with ventilators, and that's nothing but technology.
In conclusion, if you want to help people and do math at the same time, you could be a respiratory therapist.
Hi, today I'm going to be interviewing my dad, David Marshall.
Hi.
So I'm going to ask you a few questions and you have to answer them.
Truthfully.
Yeah.
Okay.
How did you first realize you wanted to pursue a career that involved mathematics?
Well, when I was in high school, I liked all the advanced math classes, physics, like calculus, geometry, algebra, trigonometry. So then that's when I decided I wanted to do something in math.
Could you describe one of your typical work days?
Oh, see, it starts at 6 o'clock in the morning, and since I am a supervisor, I deal with a lot of personnel problems, but we also we buy all the materials and goods and services to run the mine of a Red Dog. And so I spend most of the day sourcing materials, talking to vendors, talking to contractors, and trying to get those services and goods up to the site.
Could you describe what mathematical skills are required in your position on a day-to-day basis?
Well, so a lot of the stuff that we buy in different units of issues. So like with electrical cable, we'll buy by the foot, but some vendors will sell it either by a roll or in meters. So I have to be able to convert those to go back and forth to be able to get exactly the amount that we need.
What educational background do you have?
I have 2 associate's degrees, one in electronics and one in logistics.
What parts of your job do you find most challenging?
That would probably be the logistics side of it, by getting all the stuff that we need up there because of the mine. The only way we can get materials there is either by a barge during 3 months out of the year from June to September, or we have to fly it up. And because of the weather and the challenges we have, so we have to make sure that the stuff that we buy can actually fit onto the plane that we have. And that can be challenging because a lot of stuff that we buy is very large, very heavy.
What do you find most enjoyable?
What I find most enjoyable? Just dealing with people and helping people solve their problems, and just the friendships and the relationships that you make with the people you work with.
Are there any negatives to your job?
Yeah, I work a rotational job, so I'm there for 2 weeks at a time and I'm home for a week. So being gone for 2 weeks at a time away from family is the least enjoyable.
How many hours do you work in a typical week?
Well, we work 14 days straight, 12 hours a day, so it's 84 hours a week.
Which seasons of the year are the toughest in your job?
Generally, it's from January to, I would say, August. Yeah, middle of winter to the end of summer is probably the busiest because of we're getting all of our sealant orders all together, getting the barges loaded, planned out, making sure that everything gets up here.
Is this field growing enough so that there's enough room for someone like me?
Yeah, I mean, you look at Alaska as a whole and all the the slope and Red Dog Mine where I work, and then there's some other mine projects that could possibly open, and logistics is a really fast-growing field in Alaska. So there's a great opportunity for growth.
What STEM developments on the horizon could affect your occupation?
STEM stands for science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Well, there's an exciting new thing out. I don't know the name of the company, but they're developing it's kind of like the Hindenburg, that big balloon, but it's for cargo. And there's like 3 different sizes to where it can carry like 100,000 pounds, 200,000, 300,000 pounds. And it's supposed to be coming online and available coming up pretty soon. There's a lot of science and mathematics that goes on with developing that. And if that becomes feasible and it's cost effective, that could really change the way that we move our freight in and out of the line.
Well, thank you. That's all the questions I have today. And this is a great job to have because not only do you get to work with such a big community of people, and it also just gives you an opportunity to start with not necessarily a challenge, but a big leap into your career.
Thank you very much.
I'm interviewing my aunt, and she's an accountant. Okay. How did you first realize you wanted to pursue a career that involved mathematics?
Well, honestly, I wasn't really looking for a career that involved mathematics, and I didn't really know how much math was involved until I actually started working in the field. So,
cool.
Yeah.
Could you describe one of your typical work days?
So, in a nutshell, my typical day involves working with numbers, and plugging them into numerous different accounting spreadsheets and different software that basically compiles a bunch of numbers and information, and it creates specific financial information for business owners.
Okay. What mathematical skills are required in your position on a daily basis?
So for accounting, not only does it require your basic skills, being able to add, subtract, multiply, divide, you also have to kind of understand fractions and decimals and percentages and ratios and things like that. These are all required to be able to not only compile information, but understand it to know if it's correct.
Mm-hmm. What educational background do you have?
So I have an associate's degree in applied accounting, but most accounting positions do require a bachelor degree.
Oh, okay. What parts of your job do you find most challenging?
So the most challenging part of my job is adapting to the new software programs, since when they come out with a new program, they are outdated so fast because they're continuously making new programs. So that's the hardest part of my job, is being able to adapt to technology, and a certain program that we use for a certain number of years might go out of date, and then we have to learn a whole new program that's new and stuff like that. So that's the hardest part, is kind of adapting to new programs, being able to do my work or work around it.
Yeah. What do you find most enjoyable?
I enjoy seeing how information gets compiled to create different kinds of financial information. I like to solve problems, and I like to help other people solve problems.
Yeah. Are there any negatives to your job?
Yes, there are some. negative thing is just that it can get frustrating. I mean, when you're crunching numbers all day, or you're having like problems, trying to solve an equation and you just can't figure it out, and get kind of frustrating. And it can be kind of hard to focus sometimes, especially when you're staring at a screen all day. And it can get kind of time consuming and kind of tedious, but it's not too bad.
Oh. How many hours do you work in a typical week?
So I work a 40-hour week. So 8 hours a day, 5 days a week.
Oh. Which seasons of the year are toughest in your job?
So for accounting, usually around the end of the year and the beginning of the year are the toughest times because that's when we're on tight deadlines to get certain tasks completed. So like when there's an end of the year that comes up, we have to hurry up and get certain things done before we can start compiling information for the new year. So it's just kind of working around those ending dates and starting dates that can get kind of hectic.
Is this field growing enough so that there's room for someone like me?
Okay, there you go. Yeah, I would say since finance and like financial records are all kind of related to like our economy, so it kind of depends on like how our economy is doing. If our economy is like doing really well and people are doing a lot of business, then that kind of grows. It grows for demand for us, for accounting professionals. But if the economy is not doing so well, people tend to not really do business very often, which can kind of create, no jobs for us and stuff like that.
Yeah. What STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics developments on the horizon could affect your occupation?
I would say that technology is definitely going to enhance the way that we kind of traditionally do accounting, and like how we compile our information. And I think it can allow us to improve how we like collaborate with people and engage with other people. As far as like science, I think there's a definite threat to like artificial intelligence, right? So eventually we're going to have robots walking around and who can maybe take place of somebody in my profession because, they can sit there and crunch numbers too, I'm sure, at some point in time.
Yeah.
So I think it's definitely a threat out there.
Oh, well, thank you.
You're welcome.
Hello, everybody. Today I'm going to be interviewing my mother, Carrie, about her job in mathematics. So, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Carrie Ansminger. I'm Natalie's mother, and I am an office manager at a dental practice in Wasilla.
Alrighty, so I'm going to be asking you some questions today about your job, and if you could just answer them so I can. Okay, so first question. How did you first realize you wanted to pursue a career that involved mathematics?
Well, I think that when you go through school, you notice that you learn a lot of math, and as you get into higher education, you use even more math, so it was a good transition to learn all of that math in school and then be able to use it in a job.
Okay, so could you describe one of your typical work days?
A typical work day for me is arriving at the office early, getting there before all of the patients, making sure everything's ready to go, so that way when our day starts, we have everything all set and we can run our day smoothly.
Alrighty. What mathematical skills are required in your position on a day-to-day basis?
Working in a doctor's office, I have to use a lot of math to work with patient insurances, collect people's money when they have to pay for services, balance at the end of the day and run reports and things like that. So I use math every day.
Okay. What educational background do you have?
So I have a bachelor's degree in sociology. So I went to UAA in Anchorage and got my 4-year degree.
All right. So what parts of your job do you find most challenging?
The most challenging parts of my job is probably having to work with insurance companies. That can be pretty stressful sometimes.
Yeah. Alrighty. What do you find most enjoyable?
The thing I find the most enjoyable about what I do is helping people when maybe they come in and they're not very proud of their smile, and we're able to help them get their teeth fixed and help them feel better.
That's a good reason. Are there any negatives to your job?
No, not really. There's no negatives. It can be stressful sometimes, but all in all, the hours are great, and I really like the people that I work with, so yeah, it's a good job.
She gets Fridays off. Alrighty. How many hours do you work in a typical week?
I work 35 to 40 hours a week.
Okay. Which seasons of the year are the toughest in your job?
I don't know about the toughest, but our busiest time of year is at the end of the year and at the beginning of the year, because again, people are trying to use their insurance benefit. A lot of people have waited all year and then at the last minute are trying to get in to get something done, and that's when I have to work with patient treatment plans and get a bunch of things in order so that hopefully they can get their stuff taken care of at the end of the year.
That's why she's always gone. At the end of the year. Just kidding, she's not. Alrighty. In this field is this field growing enough that there's room for someone like me?
Well, the medical field is constantly growing. There's always new things coming up, new technology that's evolving, new procedures, new ways to do certain things that may have been done one way or the same way for a long time, but now there's a new way to do them. So there's definitely room for technology in the medical field, absolutely.
All right. Okay, what STEM developments on the horizon could affect your occupation?
Well, again, evolving technology. So for me, when I have to do stuff with patient insurances, claims, or billing, that sort of thing, as technology evolves, we'll be moving away from using paper and everything will become more on the computer, so we'll be paperless soon.
Yeah. Trees are starting to stay. Well, that's all we have time for today. Mom, I'd like to thank you for being here today.
Well, thank you for having me.
So if being a doctor isn't a job for you, it sounds like working in a doctor's office still allows you to use a lot of math. So just keep that in mind. Alrighty, thanks everybody, and yeah, bye.
Bye.
This is Joshua Nance. He is a pilot working for Cathay Pacific. So, Mr. Nance, how did you first realize you wanted to pursue a career that involved mathematics?
Well, as a young boy, I've always loved science, mathematics, and physics, and they all come together in aviation.
Could you describe one of your typical work days?
Oh, yes. Well, I show up very early in the morning. I do a quick few calculations to make sure that the performance of the aircraft is suitable for the day of, and then we continue to program computers and get the aircraft into the air.
What mathematical skills are required in your position on a day-to-day basis?
Oh, on a day-to-day basis, there are many, but it mostly involves division, multiplication, addition, and subtraction. And that's about it on a day-to-day basis.
What educational background do you have?
I have a Bachelor of Arts degree in History and Political Science.
What parts of your job do you think you find most challenging?
Oh, the most challenging parts of my job occur when something goes wrong. Because nobody knows what's going to happen, and you just have to deal with all of the challenges and the problems that come up.
What do you find most enjoyable?
I think I also find that aspect most enjoyable because it is a challenge and it involves many different skills to solve many different problems on an any-day basis.
Are there any negatives to your job?
Oh yes, the traveling through different time zones, the working through the middle of the night, waking up early, going to bed late.
How many hours do you work in a typical week?
Oh, I wouldn't say I work more than 35 to 40 hours in a typical week.
Which seasons of the year are the toughest in your job?
Oh, that's an excellent question, because since we travel all across the globe, summertime is very challenging in Hong Kong because of the typhoons. Wintertime is very challenging in North America because of the snowstorms. And winter is also challenging in South America and Australia because it's summer down there and they have thunderstorms and hurricanes in January.
Is this field growing enough so that there is room for someone like me?
Oh yes, it is. It is a very fast growing industry, and there will be many opportunities as far as your creative mind can think in the future.
What STEM developments on the horizon could affect your occupation?
Oh, I think any development in STEM could affect my occupation, from space travel to flying faster than the speed of sound to pilotless aircraft.
Thank you for coming here to teach me how math is involved in your job, Mr. Nance.
You're very welcome, Josie.
I think that being a pilot would be a good job for someone who loves math because you use math every day. And math is all about solving problems, and so is aviation. Aviation uses science, technology, engineering, and math.
This is my mom. I'm going to interview her about how her job uses math. How did you first realize you wanted to pursue a career that involved mathematics?
Well, I've always been very, very interested in science ever since I was in elementary school. And so, without a doubt, when I was going to college, I knew I wanted to major in science, just because I'm just curious about how our world works. And so, I took lots of classes in college that involved using physics and chemistry, and I was a biochemistry major in college, and now I am a high school science teacher.
Could you describe one of your typical work days?
Sure. Well, since I teach high school, I usually get to work, and first thing I do in the morning is check my emails, and then I start getting stuff prepared for the day. Sometimes it involves measuring chemicals that my students are going to use later in the day during labs, and getting other lab supplies out so that my students can learn and do science in my classroom during the day.
What mathematical skills are required in your position on a day-to-day basis?
Well, just the teacher part, of course, I have to do things like calculate student grades and check their work, check their math on assessments. But then specifically being a science teacher, a lot of times, like I said, I have to mix up chemicals, different molarity solutions for my students to use during labs, and also teach them math, teach them how to use math to analyze data. I teach life science, so it's not physics or chemistry, but we still do a lot of statistical analysis on the data that we collect to see if our results actually support our hypothesis or do not support our hypothesis.
Okay. What educational background do you have?
I have my bachelor's degree in biochemistry from Northern Michigan University. Go Wildcats! And then I have a teaching certification that allows me to teach in public schools in Alaska.
What parts of your job do you find the most challenging?
Well, sometimes I deal with a lot of paperwork as a teacher, but I really love spending time with the students and getting to share my love of science with them.
Okay. What do you find most enjoyable?
Oh, I love spending time with my students, and I'm such a science nerd, and I get so excited about science, and I just love being able to see that excitement in my students sometimes and be able to pass that enthusiasm on to them.
Are there any negatives to your job?
Not that I can think of. Sometimes the early mornings are hard, but it's worth it.
How do you work on a typical work day?
How long?
Oh, how long do you work in a typical week? Or a day?
Well, as teachers' hours at my school are 7:15 to 2:45, but of course teachers, we put in a lot of time in the evenings and the weekends as well.
Yeah. Which seasons of the year are toughest in your job?
Springtime is a little hard because a lot of my students are antsy and want to go outside and enjoy the nice weather. And of course, the good thing about being a biology teacher is that, guess what? We do get to go outside and spend time out in the woods and outdoors and learning about our surroundings.
Is a field growing enough so that there will be room for someone like me?
Yes, we need lots of up-and-coming people that are interested in science and want to share that knowledge and that love of science with our young people.
And finally, what STEM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, developments on the horizon could affect your occupation?
Oh, wow. Well, as teachers, and especially science teachers, we certainly use a lot of technology in our classrooms. They're making better and better microscopes for us to use, different computer programs to help us analyze data, both data about our students as well as about experiments that we're running in my classes. I can see us using a lot of different programs to analyze data. We have lots of different types of probeware that we use in collecting data during labs. So I'm sure there's going to be lots of developments in all of those areas.
Thank you. Thank you.
Take 3. Interview. Anna Banks and Papa Hughes.
Are you on?
You're on.
Oh. Hi, I'm Anna, and today I'm going to be interviewing my grandpa, Randy, and I'm going to interview him about mathematics and his day-to-day life with his job. So the first question I'm going to ask you is, how did you first realize you wanted to pursue a career that involved mathematics?
When I decided I wanted to pursue a career in science, and I realized that mathematics is the language of science, then it was very clear to me that I was not going to be able to separate the two, and so I was actually pursuing a career in both.
Could you describe one of your typical work days?
One of my typical work days is I go to school and I greet students and I teach classes. Some may involve mathematical analysis, some classes might not, but then I collect papers and grade papers and give them back and I figure out grades and I look at test scores. I do all of those kinds of things each day.
What mathematical skills are required in your position on a day-to-day basis?
On a day-to-day basis, it's the basic mathematical skills of determining percentages, looking at data, and interpreting data on a fairly basic level. Those are my daily mathematical skills that I use.
What educational background do you have?
I have a bachelor's degree in biology. I've taken a lot of math classes along the way, and I also have a master's degree in counseling.
What parts of your job do you find most challenging?
Most challenging is dealing with cantankerous students.
Okay, you guys have 2 minutes.
What do you find most enjoyable?
Dealing with cantankerous students.
Are there any negatives to your job?
Dealing with cantankerous students.
How many hours do you work in a typical week?
60.
Which seasons of the year are the toughest in your job?
Spring.
Is this field growing enough so that there's room for someone like me?
There's always room for someone like you.
What STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics developments on the horizon could affect your occupation?
Well, the developments on the horizon all have to do with accessibility to information and the ability to manipulate information through robotics and technological means so that we can do higher level skills like designing things and less of the lower things like calculating numbers.
Well, thank you. And if you want to be a teacher, any kind of teacher, math, science, or whatever, maybe even a reading teacher, mathematics is always involved. Thank you.
This is my mother. She works as a
Still processing tech
at
the Surgery Center of Wasilla.
and your name is.
Gloria Gustafson.
I'm here to just ask some questions.
Pablo, move, Pablo. Pablo, scoop.
About your job. How did you first realize you wanted to pursue a career that involves mathematics?
It actually ended up being a fluke. My mother-in-law, she's a nurse, and she told me that there was a job opening at, Matsy Regional.
Next question. Could you describe one of your typical work days?
One of my typical work days is very hectic, busy, trying to turn over instruments to facilitate successful outcome of surgeries.
What mathematical skills are required in your position on a day-to-day basis?
On a day-to-day basis, basically for my math skills, fortunately, thankfully, all I have to do is basic addition and subtraction and basic fractions.
What educational background do you have?
My educational background is that I have 2 degrees. I have an associate's degree and I have a bachelor's degree in business administration.
What parts
and
of your
also I'm also certified tech in still processing.
What parts of your job do you find most challenging?
I would probably have to say the most challenging thing about my job is preparing the instruments for surgery.
What do you find most enjoyable?
The most enjoyable aspect about my job is that I get to interact with a lot of different people from a lot of different backgrounds, and I get to communicate and facilitate with certain surgeons in different specialties of surgery.
Are there any negatives to your job?
There's always negatives to everything, but I would have to say the most negative part about my job is dealing with difficult coworkers.
How many hours do you work in a typical week?
Oh Lord, it depends. My max is probably 60, and the minimum is probably, let's say, let me think about it. Weekly, 40. So the max is 60 hours a week, and the minimum is 40.
Which seasons of the year are toughest in your job?
The heaviest season for my job is during the winter because there's a lot of slips and falls that people have.
Yeah.
So we have to do a lot of orthopedic surgeries to help people facilitate their injuries.
Is this field growing enough so that there's room for someone like me?
There's always room for people like everybody, especially you, Matthew. In the medical field, especially with sterile processing, it's an easy way to introduce, I guess, say, an introduction to surgery is sterile processing.
Yeah, because it's just kind of cleaning the tools so you know what it is. Last question. What STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics develops on the horizon could affect your occupation?
I would probably have to say, as far as STEM is concerned, the developing horizon effect of my occupation through STEM would be, I would say the technology part, because our job is always ever changing and technology is always changing in the medical field.
And that's it.
I'm interviewing my dad, Sam Ivy, who is a fishery biologist for the state of Alaska in the Matanuska area. How did you first realize you wanted to pursue a career that involved mathematics?
I have a love for the outdoors and for fish and wildlife, and it just so happens that the field I chose comes with a lot of math, and I enjoy all the challenges that brings.
Could you describe one of your typical work days?
A typical work day during the summer months, we operate a lot of salmon weirs out on the various streams in the Mat-Su area. So I'll take the daily salmon counts we get from those weirs and plug those into mathematical models to help me understand better how large the salmon runs that are coming in on these various streams, and help me make decisions about how many fish we should allow people to catch.
What mathematical skills are required in your position on a day-to-day basis?
Well, there's a lot of basic arithmetic, also a lot of algebra that's involved, and a lot of looking for relationships between different data sets and making estimates of different things, from abundance of salmon that might be in a river, things like that. So it's pretty diverse.
What educational background do you have?
Well, I have a bachelor's science degree in biology and a minor in chemistry. The highest level math class that I've ever had was calculus, and I've had some on-the-job training.
What parts of your job do you find most challenging?
Most challenging is taking the information that we are using to make daily decisions on fisheries management and relating that to the general public in a way that they can understand and follow. And that can be challenging at times, but it's important to be able to do that effectively.
What do you find most enjoyable?
I love being outside during the summer months. I love working with fish. I love the challenges that math brings to my job, and I love that it's ever changing and growing. I'm learning something new every year. The more years I work, the more I learn.
Are there any negatives to your job?
Sometimes it's difficult. Sometimes people will call my office and be angry because they don't understand the decisions we've made that might affect the way that they can fish or catch or harvest fish. And so that can be challenging and it can be difficult at times.
How many hours do you work in your typical week?
Usually a standard 40-hour work week.
Which seasons of the year are toughest in your job?
What, can you repeat that?
What seasons of the year are toughest in your job?
Oh, the seasons. They change for me constantly, and I enjoy that. The summer months are very busy and can involve a lot of hours using the data we get from the field and helping us make decisions during the season. But during the winter months, those are challenging as well, because then we're writing reports and we're working with advisory groups and with the public, and we're making graphs and tables and things like that and putting all the data together. So it just kind of varies with the season.
Is this field growing enough so there's room for someone like me?
Definitely. There's a lot of room for young people in my field with fish and game, and I'm always encouraging young people to pursue that career because it can be exciting. And just going out and camping with their families during the summer months is gaining experience being out on the rivers, and it can be an exciting way to put together math and science, I think.
What STEM developments on the horizon could affect your occupation?
I've seen a lot of growth in the field of genetics and how that relates with fisheries management, and we can take tissue samples from salmon, and we can see where those salmon might be destined to spawn and what rivers they might be going to spawn, and that gives us good information for how to manage those fisheries. And so I see a future with that, and I think that we'll see growth in that field as we go along.
Thank you for letting me interview you. If you love the outdoors, science, and math, this is the perfect job for you because you will have to use your mathematical and science skills while you're in the outdoors.
This is Tara Johnson. She is a teacher at Sherrod Elementary, and she teaches the Blended Academy. How did you first realize you wanted to pursue a career that involved mathematics?
There wasn't ever a time that I realized I wanted to pursue a career in math. It just happens that math is embedded in all careers.
Could you describe one of your typical work days?
Yeah, so I start school at 7:30, and the first hour and a half of school, I'm taking attendance and counting students, and then after that, we're doing math lessons. At about 9:05, we take a break, and we eat breakfast, and then after that, we start our learning activities again, and then kids go home at 11:30.
What educational background do you have?
I graduated from high school in Palmer, and then I got a Bachelor of Science degree and a Master's degree in teaching.
What mathematical skills are required in one of your day-to-day basis?
So I use math every day. I use math during math class when I'm helping students learn their math concepts, and just calculating and keeping track of time throughout the day.
What parts of your job do you find most challenging?
A challenge is trying to figure out the best way to explain something so that kids can understand it, and if they don't understand it the first time, trying to figure out a different way to say it and present it so that they finally get it. That always keeps me on my toes.
What do you find most enjoyable?
I love when I see light bulbs go off and I can help kids understand something that is difficult for them.
Are there any negatives in your job?
No, just challenges that I have to figure out throughout the day.
How many hours do you work in a typical week?
Usually 40.
Which season of the year are toughest in your job?
I would say late winter, because we are ready for spring, we're ready to go outside, we're ready for more daylight. We go from, how many hours are in the day in the shortest part of the year? Like around 4 or 5?
I have no idea.
Oh, and then we gain daylight, and I think everybody's really excited for more daylight and excited to get outside. So I would say January and February are most difficult.
In this field, is this field growing enough so there's room for someone like me?
Absolutely. There's always going to be a need for teachers, and there's always going to be a need for kids to learn. So there's lots of room for people like you.
What STEM developments on the horizon could affect your occupation?
So with the advancements of technology, kids are going to be learning more online along with a teacher, and the possibilities are endless in terms of developing applications and coding robots, and I think it's a pretty exciting time.
Thank you for coming, and if someone loves being a teacher, would be a good job because being a teacher has many subjects and math is one of them. You can teach students math in your own unique way.
Good morning, everyone. Today I'm here interviewing Mr. Coast, a retired mathematician. So, Mr. Coast, how did you first realize you wanted to pursue a career that involved mathematics?
Well, in high school, I was very good at math, so that sort of led me down the road to becoming an engineer.
So, which job did you end up getting, your most recent job?
I worked for BP as a project portfolio manager, which helped BP invest their capital dollars in the best projects to maintain their infrastructure on the North Slope to produce everything.
So, could you describe one of your typical workdays for us?
Generally, I like to get into work early and I answer my emails, and then I check our database that we kept our project ideas in, and then I'd get ready for meetings, and then I would also do training with our database users for our project database.
So, what mathematical skills are required in your position on a day-to-day basis?
I use order of expressions a lot, algebra with different variables to run our economics for our projects. And then when I used to check drawings for projects, geometry and trigonometry.
What educational background do you have?
Well, along with the high school diploma, I have the undergraduate degrees in engineering technology, architecture, and then a master's in business administration.
What parts of your job did you find most challenging?
Generally, that was meetings, because I'm an introverted person and shy, and meetings with large groups were difficult.
What did you find most enjoyable?
I really love to solve problems. I always have. Take a problem, design something, and then build it, and also love to assist and help people do training.
Were there any negatives?
I think the negatives were the meetings, large groups, and doing presentations, since I was a pretty shy person.
How many hours did you work in a typical week?
Typical week, I tried to keep it at 40 hours to balance life and work as well.
So how many hours a day did you work?
We had a flexible work schedule, and we'd work a 9-hour day, but we'd get every other Friday off. Sometimes I'd work 10 or 11 hours, but then I'd work less other days than that.
Which seasons of the year were the toughest?
Definitely winter time was the toughest, with the long commute from Palmer to Anchorage. It was difficult in the winter with icy roads.
Is this field growing enough so that there's room for someone like me?
There is. Anybody that's intelligent, very good with the STEM subjects can do well as long as they work hard and focus. And the oil industry has peaks and valleys, but there's always work there around the world if you're willing to work hard.
So it sounds like if you love to travel and you work hard, you've got a great job there.
I think so.
What STEM skills or STEM developments on the horizon could affect the occupation?
I think we hear a lot about artificial intelligence, and I think that's something that's both exciting, but also with the computers and learning, and it could affect the amount of jobs available. But there's always going to be work there for people.
So thank you, Mr. Coast, for telling us about your job. All of BP. Sounds like this occupation will be great for anyone who loves to travel, and as long as you work hard at the algebra and those tricky math questions, you'll have a great place at BP in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.